You are standing on a hill 15,000 years ago. Below you, a river cuts through a green valley. There are no fences, no walls, no border checkpoints. The ground beneath your feet belongs to no one. You can walk in any direction for as long as your legs can carry you. You will never cross a line. You will never have to show a passport. For the first 290,000 years of human existence, this was the default. No nations, no countries, just the earth and the people on it. And then, somewhere in the last fraction of human history, someone invented an idea so incredibly powerful that 8 billion people now organize their entire lives around it. And most of you have never once stopped to ask where it came from. So, how exactly did humans invent countries? The answer is not a simple line on a map, and it starts with a terrifying limitation in your own brain. For 96% of our species' existence, you didn't belong to a place. You belonged to a family, to a small, mobile group of about 50 people. You moved when the food moved. You had no fixed address, and this group was held together by something very specific. You knew everyone in it personally. Evolutionary psychologists call this cognitive limit Dunbar's number. Your brain can only maintain about 150 stable social relationships. Below 150, you know who is who. You know who owes whom. You can manage society through gossip, reputation, and quiet pressure. But above 150, this system completely collapses. You cannot personally track 300 social connections. You can't remember every grudge. When the system breaks down, you need something new to hold people together. Something bigger than a family tree. Think about what this means for the invention of countries. India has 1.4 billion people. Even Vatican City has 800. None of them can function on personal relationships alone. A country is a workaround for the limits of human biology. But this workaround didn't appear overnight. It started with a decision to stop moving. Around 12,500 BC, a culture in the Levant did something unusual. They stayed in one place. They built round stone houses. They decided this specific patch of dirt was home. But they were still hunter-gatherers. They hadn't invented farming yet. Settling down changes your relationship with the ground beneath you. When you are a nomad, the earth is a resource you walk over. When you settle, the earth is a resource you invest in. You clear it. You store food in it. And you bury your dead in it. And once you bury your ancestors somewhere, that dirt is no longer just dirt. It becomes identity. Early tombs functioned as territorial markers. You bury your dead to tell everyone else. This land belongs to the people who came from these bones. The first border signs were not fences. They were graves. This is the first seed of a country. Not a law, not an army, a burial. But graves and houses weren't enough to unite thousands of strangers. You needed a shared belief. In southern Turkey, at a site called Göbekli Tepe, hunter-gatherers built massive stone pillars long before they learned to farm. They came from scattered bands across the region to build something monumental together. The temple came first. The city came later. Religion came before agriculture. Belief came before borders. You can't personally know 10,000 people, but you can all believe in the same God. Shared belief is the first technology that allowed strangers to cooperate. Every country runs on this same technology. A shared fiction. Today, they just print it on a passport. But shared belief doesn't make a state. For that, you need something else. You need grain. Around 10,000 BC, humans started domesticating wheat. The first states formed specifically around grain. Not yams, not cassava. Grain. The reason is simple. Grain is visible. It ripens at a predictable time. It can be measured, divided, and stored. In other words, grain can be taxed. A root growing underground is invisible. No one can count your yams. But wheat stands above the ground, ripening all at once. Anyone with eyes can estimate your harvest. A state, what would eventually become a country, is fundamentally a grain taxing operation. Everything else, borders, armies, laws, exists to make that taxation possible. Think about that. Every anthem you've ever heard, every war ever fought over a border, has a lot to do with the fact that wheat is easy to count. But before you can tax the grain, you need to keep the people in place. You need walls. Around 8,000 BC, Jericho built a massive stone wall and a tower. Some argue it was for defense. Others say it was to keep the labor force inside. Early states had to hold on to their population for labor and taxation. Building that wall took organized labor. It took administration, and administration is the skeleton of a country. Once you have surplus grain and walls, the next step is inequality. Whoever controlled the granary controlled the food supply, and whoever controlled the food had power. For tens of thousands of years, egalitarian mechanisms kept anyone from getting too powerful. If you try to make yourself a chief, your community mocked you until you stopped. The shift happened when ambitious individuals bypassed these mechanisms, usually by claiming a special relationship with the gods. Once temporary prestige became a hereditary rank, you were one step away from a king. And a kingdom is a country with a crown. But a kingdom of 200 people is not a country. For that, you need a city. Around 3500 BC, Uruk became the first true city on Earth. A city of 40,000 people has a problem. You can't run it on gossip. You need accounting. You need standardized metrics. So, they invented writing. But writing wasn't invented for poetry or philosophy. It was invented for taxes. Over 85% of the earliest clay tablets are administrative records, grain distribution, worker rations, livestock inventories. The first written word was probably a number next to a picture of a barley sack. A country, it turns out, is built on paperwork. Along with writing, they mass-produced beveled rim bowls, standardized ration containers to distribute exact portions of grain to workers. The same bowl, the same food, every day. That's a payroll system. Now, with bureaucracy in place, came actual borders. Around 2500 BC, two Sumerian city-states fought over a strip of fertile land. They resolved it by surveying the boundary and setting up an inscribed stone pillar. This is one of the oldest records of a formal political border on Earth. Two countries arguing about where one ends and the other begins. Sounds familiar? But a country requires something more than a line in the dirt. It requires the idea that everyone inside that line belongs to each other. In places where fertile land was surrounded by deserts or mountains, people couldn't escape. When war broke out, the losers couldn't pack up and leave. There was nowhere to go. They were absorbed into the winner's territory. Chiefdom absorbed chiefdom. Violence and conquest forged the early states long before borders became official. The borders came later. The massacre came first. This is how most countries were founded. By force. But not every ancient civilization built their country the same way. The Indus Valley civilization spanned an area larger than Egypt and Mesopotamia combined. Their cities were built on precise grids. Their bricks were perfectly standardized. Yet, there is almost no evidence of royal tombs, giant statues of rulers, or armies. It might have functioned as a confederation run by trade guilds, not a king. A country can begin with a system of weights and a mutual agreement to use the same bricks. A social contract written in clay. But even these ancient empires were not countries in the modern sense. The modern country requires ordinary people to feel they belong to a territory. For most of human history, you belong to a clan. A country asks you to belong to a location. This was a massive reprogramming of how humans perceive themselves. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia laid the foundation. It established the principle that each state controls its own internal affairs. The system of 193 UN member states is based on rules written centuries ago. But the legal framework wasn't enough. The emotional foundation came later. A nation is an imagined community. You will never meet 99% of your fellow citizens, yet you somehow feel you are part of the same story. This feeling is entirely artificial. The machine that created it was the printing press. When millions of strangers read the same words, at the same time, in the same language, it created a sense of belonging to a single community. Printing made nations imaginable. The state education system manufactured them. Nationalism doesn't awaken nations. It invents them. When Italy unified, only 2% of the population spoke standard Italian. They said, "We have made Italy. Now we must make Italians." The country came first. The people who supposedly defined it came after. The French Revolution took this idea and turned it into a weapon. Sovereignty moved from the king to the nation. A country was no longer just something you lived in. It was something you could be asked to die for. And sometimes, borders were drawn by people who had never set foot in the country. Lines drawn on a map by European colonialists with a ruler and a bottle of wine, dividing ethnic groups in half and forcing rivals into a single administrative unit. The countries they created are younger than most people realize. South Sudan became independent in 2011. The world is still inventing countries. The existence of a nation is a daily plebiscite. It exists because the people inside it wake up every day and act like it exists. It is held together by an agreement, by collective memory, and by collective forgetting. You have to forget the violence and injustice that built the borders you live in, or the agreement falls apart. Tonight, you will go home to a country. You probably won't think about it, but this country is younger than pottery, younger than farming, younger than the dog on your couch. For 98% of human history, it didn't exist. And the only reason it exists now is because thousands of years ago, someone grew a field of wheat, someone counted the harvest, and someone built a wall around it. And then, they convinced the people behind that wall that they were all the same. That is what a country is. A story enough people believe for just long enough.